What is the best miniature wargaming rule set out there? That's what we're going to focus in on in this Wargaming Tactica vlog. And I'm going to narrow it down a little bit because when you say wargaming, we kind of have three different levels in my opinion. The first would be big mass battles. And this could be naval. This could be sci-fi out in space. This could be DBA, DBN, massive armies. And sometimes the miniatures are 1-to-1. Sometimes it represents an element. I've got 4 Romans on my stand. That doesn't represent 4 figures. It represents a part of my legion. Then we kind of drill down a little bit. And I think this band is where most war games operate. You've got stuff like Warhammer 40,000 or Chain of Command where it's 1-to-1. So one figure represents one figure. One tank represents one tank. And you might have 20 or 30 figures, or depending on the army, a little bit more. You've got some vehicles. You've got some support. It kind of represents a snapshot of the battlefield. I like to feel like when I'm playing 40K at the club, often what we'll have is 3 or 4 tables lined up together. And while each of us are doing our own separate battle, it has that feeling of, well, next to me on my left is a battle going on. Next to me on my right is a battle going on. Behind me and in front of me are different tables. This is my little snapshot of that battle for salvation in the moment. And then we take it down to a further level, skirmish games, right? Something like God Tier, where you've got some war bands, you've got a leader, you've got 5 or 6 units. This idea to magnify in and out. I'm going to focus on my vote for a rule set in that mid band. I think that's what most of us would play. Now, the best rule set, of course, is the one that you consistently play with your friends and have fun. And no rule set is absolutely perfect. It's a simulation in the moment. It's a simulation in the moment, whether that's sci-fi, modern, historical. It's trying to give you a sandbox of rules to play with so things are fair or at least understood of what you can do and can't do, but give you that flexibility where the outcome is going to be dependent on your tactics, modified by the fog of war. Fog of war meaning dice or cards or unit activations. So within that, that's what we explore. Now, certain rule sets, we're going to framework it out one more, and then I'm going to share my vote for the best rule set. And then, as always, looking for more wargaming experiences to try out, your vote. Now we get into this, we get into a duality. Some wargaming rule sets are written specifically for miniatures and to sell miniatures. A perfect example, Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Lord of the Rings, where we're going to make the miniatures first, the narrative, and these stories and these miniatures and these games have a tremendous backstory, and the rules are going to be an afterthought. So we're going to design a Space Marine model first, make it look cool, and then figure out how it works on the tabletop. Those type of rule sets only work, only power those models. Well, then we see the opposite where you have a rule set, but it's not dependent on any one particular figure. It's made for a system or a time period, historical, World War II, Napoleonics, ancients, and here's the rule set. You use whatever figures you want. You could play with whatever scale you want. You could play with counters and tokens. The rule set is the focus. So we have generally those two. My vote for the best rule set, the one that I'm really enjoying right now, Chain of Command, World War II. Now, I've pushed up to the playlist here, Chain of Command. You can see the rules in more detail. We talk about some of the units. But this rule set, while it was designed for World War II, it's got the rule set and it has the various army lists. You can use whatever figures that you want to play this. The different scale of figures, the different types of figures, the different consistency. It's not focusing on one just miniature line. Pushing that out, pulling that out. It is such an amazing rule set and so much fun. I regularly proxy my 40K miniatures for it. We're using World War II rule sets and stats. So a Space Marine Predator tank can easily become a Tiger tank. A Land Raider can easily become a King Tiger tank. Likewise, playing different armies, you can kind of map it out one-to-one. Can even have sides playing similar armies with those miniatures. The rule set is that fantastic and that amazing with how it looks on the table, with how it plays. Now, here's, in short, why I love this rule set so much. And, of course, again, going to the Chain of Command playlist here on the channel, you can see more of it. When does a game begin, right? It often begins with deployment. Now we're going to jump into a little bit of tactica here. The idea behind deployment means you're putting out your miniatures, your units, your toys, and you have some knowledge of the mission. So you're looking to get yourself in a position, turn one, modified by terrain, modified by the mission, to really get momentum, to really get advantage, to move out to occupy the midfield of that. Now, depending on the army I have, I might be a little more aggressive. If my army's faster than yours or a little bit more dynamic in the beginning, maybe you want to be a little bit more defensive. So deployment is kind of like setting the stage for what we want to do. But for the most part, static is, and I am generalizing here a little bit, it's static. It's just there. It's not dynamic. Here's the gaming table. Here's your side, my side. Put out your toys. I put out my toys. Here we go. The way Chain of Command works is you have jump-off points. These represent points on the table where units can potentially emerge from. So think about taking a poker chip or a terrain marker and placing 2 or 3 on your side of the table. They have to be behind some terrain or behind a wall. When the game starts, you don't deploy any units. They can be anywhere on the table, hidden. There's this idea of a completely hidden deployment. When a unit deploys, it moves from a jump-off point. So if there's 2 buildings, I have a jump-off point behind the first building and the second building. When the game starts and I decide to bring on a squad of infantry, I get to pick in that moment where I want to bring them off from. And what that represents is hidden movement, hidden deployment on the battlefield. So my scouts, my forward observers, my recon squad, whatever that's going to be, has determined, hey, this building, behind this hill, and this hedgerow are where my opponent's jump-off points are into the action. Anything can be hiding behind anything there. It's very, very dynamic. So now what you get into is when you deploy your units and bring them out, do I wait on certain units? When I bring a unit out, my opponent knows. So if I deploy an MG42 team, or let's say a Space Marine Devastator squad, if we're proxying, if we're using those models, and I bring them off the jump-off point behind the building, well, now you know, hey, that's where they are. We're locked in. I got to deal with it. It's there. But maybe I hold back and I wait. So you have this dynamic deployment where you never really know with what's going on and how it's going to work. Now, as the battle progresses, of course, you're issuing orders. And the way the orders work is you roll a number of dice that are Chain of Command dice, D6s, and what you get determines on what units you can activate. Senior Command, Junior Command, Squad, Support. And you use these dice to manipulate and activate different things at different times. So essentially it is a you go, I go system. I move my toys, you move your toys. But as you play, so it has those traditional turns. But as you play, you develop command dice, which are kind of these wild cards that you can use at any time to interrupt or to cause something special to happen. So let's say you're moving a tank down the road. I've got an anti-tank team waiting, and you move forward and you decide to fire on that anti-tank team because it's your turn, right? I can't do anything. I can spend a interrupt command dice to take one shot. Maybe I hit you. If I do, then you don't get to shoot at me. If you do shoot at me because I miss or I don't take out that tank, it's this interesting back and forth. So it blends the best of both worlds where it is a traditional you go and I go, but the interrupts make it very, very interesting. They're not for free. You've got a limited number. And then the last part that I really love about the rule set is it has a lot of off-board action. Going back to what I was originally saying, this idea like, hey, we're fighting in the moment here, but there's stuff going on the right side of the table, the left side of the table. You can spend points for air support, that at some point air support will come in, make a strafing run, pull off. It could be artillery. You could call in an artillery strike. It could be a machine gun team set up somewhere that fires on a certain area. So you need to not only account for your support choices on the table, but potentially battlefield effects outside of the table. Makes things very, very narrative. Now, there's a bunch of other points that I love with shock and issuing orders and Overwatch. I'll leave that for the videos. But what wargaming system, rule set out there is so good, either with the miniatures as it's intended to play, or, wow, this system is really dynamic and really cool. Let's take some of those miniatures from other collections and utilize it. What systems do you recommend that are really, really awesome in terms of narrative, dynamic play, and of course, Tactica?